Do you like sports? Do you like art? What about science? Giraffes? Giraffe scientists that paint rugby games? It's all available on Audible, the biggest audiobook site with the largest selection of audiobooks this side of the inner solar system. No need to use your boring old eyes anymore. The ears are the future, my friend. Why, you're using them right now. So check out Audible and get your listen on. Go to www.readlearnlivepodcast.com/audible to start your 30-day free trial today.
By thinking about legacy, we think about our place in the world. We think about connection and the fact that everything is connected. We burn less bridges. We handle our confrontations with other individuals like we care about them, not like they are dismissible and will be dust in the wind.
Hello and welcome to Read, Learn, Live, the podcast about improving yourself through literature. I'm your acclaimed host, John Monaster. I'd like to welcome you to episode 54, the one where we dance the night away to all your favorite disco tunes. As always, if you have ideas for books you'd like to see featured or of authors you want to put me in touch with, you can reach me at jon@readlearnlivepodcast.com. Today, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak with author James T. Robilotta. James Robilotta is an author, professional speaker, coach, and entrepreneur. A few years ago, James had his first book published, Leading Imperfectly, The Value of Being Authentic for Leaders, Professionals, and Human Beings. He speaks internationally to willing and unwilling attendees about authentic leadership, giving courageous feedback, and promoting memorability. His clients include American Express, General Electric, and many others. His talks are infused with self-awareness and comedy, stemming from his background as an improv comedian. James is also a coach. He loves helping people get out of their own way to live the lives they want. Visit his website, jametrobo.com. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Read, Learn, Live podcast. I am your host, John Monaster, and I am super excited today to be joined by James T. Robilotta. James, say hello.
Yo, what's up, everybody?
Everything. James, thanks for coming on. I am real excited. We got your book right here, Leading Imperfectly, The Value of Being Authentic for Leaders, Professionals, and Human Beings. I feel like I'm all three, so I am real excited to talk about all the wonderful insights you've got in this book. So I really like to start off by just saying, what is the book in your own words? What's the elevator pitch? What's it all about?
Sure, man. Thanks so much for having me too, dude. I really appreciate this. So the elevator pitch is this idea that we as humans can't learn things from people who are perfect. We can only learn things from people who are imperfect. And so it's about the kind of the whole thing is that we should lead through our faults, lead through our imperfections, our slips, our struggles, because vulnerability, authenticity, relatability are super powerful tools in leadership.
That makes sense. And just quickly, maybe talk about your background a little bit. How did you come to the point of deciding to write a book about this? And, where did you work through to get here?
So I was on the job for about 3 days and said, I got it. I'm writing a book. No, I was a student leader in college and started getting really passionate about leadership then, and just in particular, the role that connection plays in leadership. And then went on to work in higher education, advising, supervising, training, cultivating leaders, and loved that. And then also started up a couple of companies too. One where one's called an improv team called North Coast, where even though in the beginning I don't think we would have called it leadership, I think we would have called it just improv and fun and just like people getting together doing something cool. We really turned it into a business, thanks to my buddy Doug Wydick. And so I think doing all that kind of stuff really kind of fell right into this passion area of mine. And I became a professional speaker about 8 or 9 years ago also. And I realized that this was an area that I was super passionate about. And so that's what drew me. One of the reasons why I wrote the book.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And just shout out to North Coast, because that's what brought us together.
Yeah,
you substituted one of my classes, and I said, wow, this guy, he's got it. He's got something.
Got that
So,
sauce.
so you did all this stuff through your whole life. You're a leader. You're working with leaders. You're helping people out. You're building up a lot of knowledge. What made you wake up and say, "Wow, I could really write a book about this"? Like what flipped that switch?
Yeah, for sure. John, that's the interesting piece about all this is because I audaciously wrote a book about leadership. I started writing it at the age of like 32, right? Which is not when you're supposed to start writing a book on leadership, according to what's on the shelf at Barnes and Noble, right? And so I was super self-conscious about writing it. Ultimately, that's why I decided to write the book and really tried to write the book from my current level. I didn't go out and do a whole butt ton of research on leadership and like what are the top 50 CEOs do in the morning. And that's, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I decided I was like, let me write this book from my current place and my current viewpoint.
Which is really all you can do. I think it's interesting when you look at those types of books or you look at, blog posts that are like, what is the morning routine of this successful person? And you're like, does that actually matter? Does it matter what order they have their coffee versus their breakfast versus that they're, when they do their exercise or whatever else? And so I think it's important to find someone you can relate to, understand what works for them, and maybe connect on that.
That's what I was trying to do. Yeah. I'm writing a book on authenticity and vulnerability. So I'm not going to tell a whole bunch of other people's stories in the book. And so that's one of the things that really drew me to writing the book. The other thing that kind of allowed me to write the book, quote unquote, allowed, is that whenever you're at a place in your life, people want to know when you're going to get to the next place. Right? It's like, oh, you're dating, when are you getting married? Oh, you're married, when are you having a kid? Oh, you have a kid, when are you dying? Right? And it's just like people always want to know what's next. And so as soon as I became a speaker, everybody started asking me, it's like, oh, when's your book coming out? And I was like, I don't have
book? What's a book?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is this not good enough for you? So a lot of people planted in my head that I should have a book, and so the book is important for two reasons in that vein. One is that it adds credibility. People are very impressed by authors. Yeah, I think it's because authors do things that most people would like to do and talk about doing, right? Like a lot of people want to write a book, but not a lot of people actually sit down and do it.
Exactly,
but we all
they take the time.
Right, we all have a book in us, though, for sure, at least one. It's just a matter of like the people who actually sit down and do it. So I think that's a big piece of it. And then the other one is that the book is one of my best business cards that I have. Yeah. Right. If I can have you read the book, then I think you'll be more likely to bring me in to speak, which is what I love to do. So the book is another avenue to getting me to another driver for my business, to allowing me to come and do more speaking.
So, when you started putting this all together, what was your process like? How did you actually go about writing the book?
Sure. So in the beginning, my book actually started out as, it was about 9. I think at that point I'd written 9 decently length blog posts about all under the guise of leadership, but in kind of different ways. And so what I did is I took all 9 of those blog posts and then I tripled them in length essentially for the book. And I added probably 3 or 4 more chapters of things that I thought could be good in it. So that was my initial process, is that I was writing those blog posts, not because it's like, I'll write these blog posts because that'll turn into a book one day. Yeah. Again, it was like, you should have content on the internet.
And you had stuff to share and you had thoughts and ideas.
Exactly. So that was that's initially how it started. And then I moved to upstate New York with a partner, and so she told me one day, she's like, with your ADHD, you're never going to be able to just like write a book with a long arc, like a big long story arc. Yeah. She's like, instead, you should look at your book as a bunch of different individual essays, because your ADHD, you'll jump like in between chapters and be like, oh, I want to add this to this one. Oh, I want to add this to this one. And she was brilliant and very right. So that's how I kind of wrote the book. I would have multiple chapters open at once sometimes. And my goal was every single time that I sat down to write, that I would write 500 words.
Ooh.
Which is like 1 page on Microsoft Word. Yeah. And I said, I'll write 500 words. And then inevitably, if that was my goal, I would be in a flow state and I would keep going.
Just keep going. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, that's the trick to most things, I think. It's finding a way to get yourself going. where you have this like with exercise, with whatever, it's like you're like, oh, like I don't want to do that push-up. But after you do a push-up, it's a lot easier to do the next push-up and the next one. So I think that's a great method. So sounded like you were able to get yourself into flow. What was the hardest part, or was there anything in particular that you struggled with while you were writing?
Yes, I think that during the writing process, it was a constant battle between, I would have some days where I would write a sentence and I would be like, that will be quoted until the end of time. And then but most of the days while I was writing, I was like, nobody's going to read this shit. Right? Like, who are you? Who are you? Again, kind of what I was talking about earlier, but like, who are you to write a book on this topic? Like, get over yourself.
Right.
And so that was one of the hardest things to push through, was the intense imposter syndrome that I wasn't good enough, accomplished enough, successful enough, whatever enough to be the person writing a book.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's also, that also hindered me in marketing it afterwards. I don't know if I put it out there as much because I was super self-conscious. It took me a while to say that I wrote a good book.
Yeah, I think, and that's so interesting because I think that happens to me as well. I think that happens to a lot of people. And just like you mentioned earlier, how, when you started writing the book, you're like, wait, I'm, 32. What do I have to say about all this? And it's sort of like, well, what did Mark Zuckerberg say at, 19 or whatever when he put Facebook together? What does he know? But it's like somehow if you are able to, find a place and bring your thoughts together, I think that you can make real change, at any age, at any time.
I agree with you, man. I completely agree.
So, so let's talk about the book for a bit. So, first off, you talk about leadership in terms of humanity, and you suggest that leadership is about remembering we're human and therefore leading from our faults. So what do you mean by that, and what are some examples of doing that successfully?
When it comes to leading through our faults, it's kind of like leading through our stories, remembering that we have been in the position of the people that we are leading. Individuals that all of a sudden are like, oh, I got this title, oh, I got this position, and then they forget about everybody else or like what it was like to be that. Like we see this a lot, especially between senior leadership and brand new hires. We see it a lot between administration at universities and what the students are going through, right? Like you did the same dumb stuff when you were students, but you're forgetting that right now.
We all came from somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that gap can be easily filled with our stories to remind, to let the other person know that like, hey, I've been there. There's a lot of power in relatability. And that's what this is. The idea of this is that when we see ourselves in someone else, we believe that we can. And so you sharing your perfections with me, I'm not there yet, right? Like I've messed up. I've done a lot of dumb things. I don't know. I don't have any confidence in myself yet. Or if I do, I'm in the straight fake it till you make it phase. It's constructed as opposed to real. So I think that is kind of what I'm talking about here. So leading through your faults, and some examples of that are, here's a time where I let somebody down. Here's a time where I hurt somebody. Here's a time where I didn't do what I said I was going to do, and it affected my team.
It's basically showing that you are not, some perfect human, that is above us. It's like you are real. You have made mistakes. Those mistakes have caused you problems, and you learn from them. And making that clear to people, and that improves relatability, I think, is what you're.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, think about it. When if you're having a conversation with somebody and you're giving them feedback, if you can start that feedback with, "Hey, here's what here's what we're going to talk about today. It reminded me of when I was blank, and I did something kind of like this, and I felt this way about it, or I realized that it had bigger implications. But I've been there before, and I wish somebody had pulled me aside and told me that story along with what I could be doing to be better. It's a more potent way to give feedback as opposed to, you messed up, you didn't do this right.
Yeah, don't do
Look
this.
at me, I'm perfect. Right? Because I think one thing that we see a lot of people do, and I know you've heard this phrase countless times from a lot of individuals that you've worked with before, or managers, supervisors, whatever, where a lot of people like to say the phrase like, "Oh, I mess up all the time." I mess up. Oh yeah, I always make mistakes.
Yeah.
But then we don't hear the story.
Yeah, I'm just like one of you. Promise.
Yeah, right. But it's like, if you just shared a little bit more, just if you went one layer deeper in that onion,
just
shout out to
peel the
Shrek.
curtain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going with an Oz reference, but
I'm here for that as well. That's good. I'll follow that Yellow Brick Road. And so, if you just go one layer deeper, people can see a little bit of your humanity. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that you run into every meeting and be like, I got a story to tell about a time where I was terrible. But
you have to find the right place. And I think that's really what makes effective leaders is they know when to include those stories and how to use them properly.
Yeah. I love the way you said that.
So, now to kind of talk about that in terms of our stories, you also talk about how you don't necessarily like kind of using epic quotes. You don't like using a Gandhi quote or, a Wayne Gretzky quote or whatever, because they can distract. And you say, our own stories are good enough. Focus on those stories, not other people's. So why the distinction there? I mean, why shouldn't we bring up examples of amazing people, Michael Jordan, Gandhi, and how great they are?
Yeah, this has been an interestingly disputed point, and I like that I created fire because there are places for great quotes, right? And I'm not mad at Martin Luther King. I'm not mad at Mother Teresa. I'm not mad at Gandhi. I'm not mad at Jordan. I'm not mad at Gretzky. I'm not mad at any of the great writers that Henry David Thoreau's, right? The people that we quote a lot. Those individuals are iconic and they deserve to be on the pedestals that we have put them on because they did amazing things for our society. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is that the individuals that we work with on a day-to-day basis are going to become us before they become any of these great icons in the world. I see the value in sharing our stories like, if we're looking at our dream on the other side of a lake and we know exactly what it looks like, by just telling people like, these big iconic quotes, it's just kind of be like, yeah, just get there. Just, that's where there it is. Just go. But by sharing our stories along the way in more relatable moments, we're kind of helping them build the dock across the lake, or we're throwing out the lily pads of like, hey, here are some things to keep you going, right? We're like starting to put the Cheerios down.
We're not expecting you to go from zero to hero overnight. It's a gradual process.
Right.
Yeah.
And so some people, it all depends on how you're motivated too, right? Like some people see greatness and they're motivated by greatness. Other people see greatness and they're demotivated by it because of imposter syndrome, because of self-esteem, because of who knows what happened in their upbringing or, whatever. They woke up on the wrong side of the bed that day. It could be simple.
Yeah, it goes back to the idea of tuning, being able to read a crowd, tune your message.
Yeah. And I think one thing also for me is that the reason why this is also a pet peeve for me is that I'm a speaker. I see a lot of other speakers. And so there are so many speakers that will get on stage and just get up there and be like, listen, everybody. And they'll end with this, like, listen, remember, be the change you wish to see in the world. Thank you. Everybody take care. And it's just like, come on, bro.
Yeah, that's
like
so inauthentic.
It's just not you, right? Like, but if you're going to say, be the change you wish to see in the world, which is one of the most beautiful quotes ever, right? It's stunning. And it deserves to be said. Then give me a story of what that looks like for you, right? Like follow up this iconic quote with something personal because it makes it more tangible instead of just like, flutter, flutter, flutter away like a butterfly after I drop the bike. Yeah. Right? That's what it is for me. So it's also a pet peeve, and I can own that.
You gotta get those pet peeves out.
Yeah.
So I also love the concept of the one lie. That was really an interesting chapter for me because, I thought about what mine was. So talk a little bit about the one lie and how we can figure out what our own one lie is.
Yeah, sure. So in our quest to own who we are, and which is important, right? Because you have to own who you are in order to be real to other people. In our quest to own who we are, I think that involves asking ourselves a lot of questions. Owning who you are is a journey that will take our whole lives to figure out, but we can do it more consciously from moment to moment. I think we can think about it. We can figure out, zoom out and see where we're fitting in the universe or in our plan or all that kind of stuff. And so I'm that friend who loves to ask deep questions. We're out at Applebee's having a good time. We're at the diner munching on pancakes and everybody's laughing like, this is so fun. I'm like, yeah, I know it's true. How do you define happiness?
Right.
Like I'm that guy who makes the awkward conversations with
the deep thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. So, So a question that I ask in the book, which is a question that I have asked to my friends before as well, is what's one lie that you tell yourself every single day? And so I think we all tell ourselves lies. And some of those, it's not always a bad thing. I think every single day when we wake up, we need to win. And so sharing some of those lies or having some of those lies is okay because it enables us to show up how we need to show up in this world. But all those lies are kind of like bricks that we carry, and it's making our lives heavier, right? We're working harder by not living our truth. Instead, we're living our lies. And it's just harder to be somebody else than it is to be yourself.
That's interesting. I mean, one thing that I was curious about, I mean, to me, it seems like there's magnitude to talk about here, right? I mean, there's little white lies that get you through the day, and then there's bigger lies about who you are as a person and what's going on. And, you know, do you draw any distinction there in terms of how you think people should deal with those? Should people focus on the biggest lies, or should people try and eliminate the smaller ones first? How can people think about how best to deal with that? Because like you said, I feel like it's so omnipresent in how we deal with ourselves and get ourselves through the day.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of it comes back to kindness. And we talk a lot about when we're younger, we're taught about the values of the value of kindness and being kind to others. But one thing we're not really taught a lot about when we're younger is being kind to yourself. Right? That's almost like a thing that comes in later in life after we've all put up 1,000 walls and we now have all these insecurities and we're like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to be like kind to me too, right? It's not just let me help any and every old person across the street. So I think that's a great question, man, is which one do you start with? Because I think they're right. There's some lies where, you know, like a lie I told myself this morning is that I'm not going to hit the snooze alarm 3 more times. And I did, right? Like there's those little lies, right? I'm not about to eat this whole sleeve of Thin Mints. Yeah. Where'd the Thin Mints go? Yeah. Right? Like there's some little lies. And even then you get into like some relationship stuff, like, oh, I'm not going to text her. I'm not going to text him. You know, some of those kind of lies too. And then just some deeper ones. You know, one thing I talk about in the book is my low self-esteem with my appearance, and how the way I dress is, I dress the way I dress to put a shell on so that other people will be more focused on how cool I'm dressed other than how unattractive I am. Right. And so like, there's some deeper lies that are in there for sure. I think to answer your question, it comes back to what are the ways that you can start being kinder to yourself? What are the lies that you're telling yourself that are not kind? And how can we start with some of those? Yeah. I'm not sure. And I think the way that we handle that is completely different. Some of us journal, and journaling can be really powerful. Some people, you know, sometimes my lie looks like me driving down a road at some unfathomable speed with the windows down and me blaring and belting out Fall Out Boy. Judge me if you need to. But sometimes it looks like,
been there.
Right, exactly. Thank you, John. And then sometimes it also looks like me sitting in a very small room on a couch with a person across from me sitting in a chair who looks a lot like a counselor, because it's me sitting in the room with a counselor. Yeah. The biggest point to your question is that we got to start. Right. And so
it's like with your 500 words, just get started with something, focus on something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And thinking where they all come from. Like, for example, like I'm a giant procrastinator. And so like, all right, well, let me fix my procrastination issues. But in order to fix them, I got to understand the root, because people procrastinate for such different reasons. We don't all procrastinate for the same ones. And I have to get to the root of why I procrastinate before I can change it.
Yeah, makes sense. I am, perpetually stuck with that as well. I think the way that it's so interesting, I procrastinate by finding other things to do. Like, you know, so I'll switch around to other things in my life, but we'll do that instead of the thing that I should.
Like productive procrastination?
Yeah, exactly. Productive procrastination. That's my deal. But okay, so there you have this idea also that I liked about drunk ass Dan. And the idea of calling out people and how important that is, which I totally agree with. So, you know, I love that story. Who is drunk ass Dan, and how can we find that courage to call people out?
Yeah, sure. So I was a RA in college. Throw back to the twin extra long mattresses. Let's go. So I was an RA in college, and 3 of the most impactful times for me as a student leader, really as a leader, were these 3 summer sessions where I got to work with this population of students that were admitted on a probationary basis to the university, and they had to come the last summer session. They had to come the last summer session, and they had to take a certain amount of classes, get a certain GPA in those classes, take a certain amount of study hall hours, live in the same residence hall, all that kind of stuff. And if they did all those things successfully, then they were fully admitted to the institution on a full-time basis. And so one of the years, one of my residents' name was Dan, and he liked to have a good time. And so we made we made nicknames for everybody. And the other students on the floor decided to nickname him Dad, a drunk ass Dan. It wasn't like Dad on the residence hall. It'd be like, oh, hang on a second, everybody.
Wasn't a good dad.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Let's come watch a TED Talk before we go out to the club. Yeah, not that kind of dad. So Dan was this guy who one night came home super drunk. And he wound up being like dumped into his room. I went and checked on him, and I was talking to him. I was like, "Damn, man, what's up, dude? You doing okay? Like, what's going on? Did you drink tonight?" Like, I asked him the questions that RAs are supposed to ask.
Yeah.
And he wasn't really responding. And I was sitting on the bed next to him, and he like fell onto me, and I was like, "Okay, cool. What are you doing?" And then I like kept like kind of crawling onto me. And I was, by the end of our conversation, I was holding him like a giant baby in my lap. And I was like, "Damn, man, what's up, dude? Like, just like I care about you, man. Like, just tell me, what were you doing tonight? Who were you with? Like, did you take anything? Like, let me care about you, dude." And he said, all of a sudden he snaps out of it. He looks me in the eye. He's like, "Mom, morning, waffles, sunshine, Copernicus." And he starts hallucinating.
Yeah.
And then he passes out. And I wound up having to call the police, which I didn't want to do because I knew that if I called the cops, he wouldn't be able to come to college in the fall. But I didn't know if he was okay. And so after some hemming and hawing and talking to another person, I decided to call the police. And it took 3 smelling salts to wake him up. When he woke up, he blew a .375.
Which is crazy. Yeah,
0.4 is brain dead.
Yeah.
So it's scary because I could look back at that situation and be like, "Oh, damn, I saved Dan's life." But I don't look at it that way. I look at it as a huge missed opportunity that I'm someone who's supposed to care about him. Right. And do care about him. So while I'm watching this pattern develop in his life, why am I just standing by and allowing it to happen? And as a matter of fact, perpetuating it by calling him Dad. Right.
Yeah.
Because, I should have pulled him aside and be like, "Yo, Dan, did you get this nickname? And do you like it?
Right.
Do you like it because it's better to be known for something than nothing? Or, do you like it because you think that's the only way we're ever going to accept you?" And it's like, all right, that's who you are. So we think it's funny and you make us laugh. So keep doing that. And you want to keep feeding that because validation is one of the scariest morphine drips we have in our world. Right. And so I should have pulled him aside and done in a loving way. Like, "Hey man, like, what's going on, dude? Did you choose this or was it chosen for you?
Yeah.
And let's talk about it." And so I guess to go back to your question of like, how do we know when to do that, how to do it? It's first knowing going in, like, this is going to suck and it's going to be really awkward. It's also knowing that they're going to get defensive, and them being defensive does not mean that we're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just a natural reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate being called out about my stuff. Right. It's like, yeah, I did have a 4th pizza. Screw you. Right. But yeah. So, but there's so much power in that moment and just being present with somebody and just saying, "Hey, I'm noticing this. Are you also noticing this?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it."
Yeah. I think that's something that, especially in the workplace, there could be a lot more of, because at least what I've noticed is that there's a big tendency towards waiting until kind of an end of year review to point out issues and to say, "Wow, like your performance is in the toilet," or "I don't like what you're doing," and whatever. And then, even if you as an employee feel like that's wrong, well, it's kind of your supervisor's already kind of made their mind up. They've already decided about it. And if that's something they had brought up throughout the course of the year and talked to you about, and maybe it was an actual issue and you could have corrected it and worked on it, it would have solved the problem, which would have been better for everyone, right? I mean, the ultimate goal of your boss and the company and whoever is to get you working well and make sure you get your job done. Then, you really need to intervene as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I feel like. So
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because in the beginning, it's just a misunderstanding,
Yeah.
right? Potentially, or a miscommunication. But in the end, like the way that you've built it up in their brain, it's kind of like when you're thinking about breaking up with somebody, right? Like, they have this annoying thing that they do, and then
Yeah.
you let that grate at you. It doesn't go confronted, and then you start to figure out more and more annoying things. You start to look for the annoying things that they do instead of the good things that they do, and you're building up your argument so that when you break up with them, and the story that you just shared, when you fire them, you're like, well, I got a list of things
Yeah.
that you never did anything, right?
And you're like, what? Wait.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Where did that
Yeah, for sure.
come from?
I think I wonder if you agree with this, John, but I think we often hold people accountable to standards they don't know we set for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's so. I think I think language here is imprecise. Is a lot of the issues, and especially in the relationships that we deal with, we can say that, here's an expectation, and at the office, people often do this. They'll say, "This is your expectation." We want you to do well in your writing. We want you to do well when you present to people, whatever. But it's really hard. Like, what does that actually mean? And I feel like every person that looks at that can have a different definition in their head of what a good presentation looks like and of what a good report looks like. So I think that can be the tricky part. And this is why it's so difficult. And this is why constant communication is important. Because if you, at the end of the year, just say, well, this isn't how I like to do it, and this isn't how that presentation doesn't make sense, whatever. The person can be like, well, my last boss thought that was great and wonderful and exciting, or, my last girlfriend, my last boyfriend loved when that happened, when I did this or that, and you're telling me you hate it, So I think because we can set expectations, but then they can be met or not met in a way that we're not even realizing, I think there has to be constant communication such that we can deal with the vagaries of language. That's the issue, I think. So, I mean, after that, you get into something that I thought I would not see at all in this book, which is the word love, speaking of relationships. And you use love in a variety of ways in the book, which I thought was really, really interesting. And so just to kind of kick it off, why is it important to lead with love? And how as a leader can you make that happen?
In our world, we don't like everybody, right? There's a bunch of people that I don't like, that I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time with. But in the workplace, we have to make the decision to make the effort to invest in each other. And that's what love is, right? Love's an investment. It's investing in the process with that person. Love is an investment in, I believe in you. I believe in the work that you do. I believe in the work that we do. So leading with love is just that. It's that investment, to be redundant.
Nice.
And so I think that if we approach everyone, and love, again, like you mentioned earlier and a second ago, like there's so many different types of love, right? Like it's not we're not doing open mouth kisses with everybody here. But there's so many different types of love where I don't know, the people that believe in me, the people that I believe in, I love them.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a choice that we can make. It's a choice that not a lot of people make, because I think a lot of people are skeptical. We can call it commitment issues. We can call it trust issues. We can call it whatever it is, right? Whatever walls that they have up for whatever reasons they're up. It causes people to kind of operate from this, like you're going to earn my trust. You're going to earn my respect, as opposed to being like, you were hired for a reason. I'm going to invest in you. Yeah. I'm going to, you're going to have to prove to me why I shouldn't invest in you, not why I should. I think when we approach leadership from that angle, I don't know,
that's positive as opposed to a negative.
Correct.
Acting as if things are going to go well, as opposed to acting as if things are going to go bad and I better start fixing them. That makes a lot of sense. There's a discussion about heroes and role models, right? So it's like, okay, we've got morals. How can we use those? How can we become these people? And you draw a distinction between heroes and role models, which I think is pretty brilliant. I've never read anything like that before, but I thought it was great. So yeah,
go on.
Maybe Oh my God. I mean, it's a great thing
appreciate that,
because we talk about both equally usually, and we don't really think about the difference. And you're right, there is a difference. So, tell us about that. What's the difference and why is it important?
Yeah. So I think there is a difference. I mean, ultimately it comes down to semantics, right? But the main point between the two being is that I think heroes or every leader is on a pedestal, and they've been given a right to be on that pedestal, and that's awesome that they're there. But we often don't tell many leaders that there's a button on the side of the pedestal, and that they can, if they want, use that button to shoot their pedestal way up to be above everybody that they're over, so to speak. Their mentees, their supervisees, their new hire, whatever. And there's that sense of power that sometimes comes with individuals all the way up top, as far as when they use that button to shoot their pedestal all the way up. And these individuals are kind of up there, and it's kind of murky of who they are because they don't let a lot of people in, because they're trying to be seen as perfect. They're trying to be seen as perfect. They want to keep that ego and mentality, and which I think is fascinating, because I think most of us get hired for jobs before we truly know we're ready for them.
Yeah.
Right? But in that insecurity of not knowing that we're ready for them, do we lead like ourselves, or do we lead like who we assume they meant to hire? Right? And what are the issues that come in with that? And so heroes are individuals that don't let people in, that don't, they don't have their cracks. I think in modern day or whatever day terms, literary terms, heroes are, often defined by a cape, right? Or individual heroes are individuals that do fleeting moments of heroism, right? Like Sully landing the plane in the Hudson. That was a heroic moment.
Right.
In that moment, he is a hero. Was he a hero before then? I don't know, right? I don't know anything about the man, and nor did I watch the movie. But heroes kind of have these actions also. And so heroes in leadership often try to swoop in and save the day to organizations, committees, corporate cultures that don't need saving. Instead, what they need are real people in there having real conversations. So that's why that pedestal, hitting that button and going all the way down, and being amongst the individuals like a fellow human being. That's kind of why I said the book is for leaders, professionals, and human beings. Because I love that you said, I think I'm all three. We are all three.
Yeah.
But we, for some reason, don't allow ourselves, like we think we need to be, we forget about the human being part of it. And so role models are individuals that we see them for the great that they do, and we love them for that. But we also see them for the times where they've slipped, the times where they've struggled, because they've let us in, and we see more of their picture, and we love them even more for that, because there's so much power, again, in kind of what we're talking about earlier with story. We know our role model stories more than we know our heroes' stories, because our heroes don't let everybody in.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a long roundabout answer.
It was great. I think that's perfect. And like I said, I really appreciate that difference. Focus on the role models and focus on being a role model, wherever you are. So next, I thought things got a bit dark, right? Interestingly, you asked people to imagine their funeral, to focus on legacy. What legacy do you want? And which I thought was an interesting way of framing it. But I'm just curious, why would I want to think about that in that term? I've never really focused on it in terms of the world after I die. I don't know, scary thing. So why is that helpful or relevant? Why is that a good way to frame this idea of legacy? And why is that important? Why is my legacy important?
Yeah. I live my life based on what I want to be said in my eulogy. And sometimes it puts a little bit too much pressure on me. And I think there are ways that sometimes hurts me. But for the most part, I live my life based on what I hope will be said about me when I'm gone. I do that by doing really cool things now, right? Like writing cool stories, both actually writing and living cool stories.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes you're right. This is a big concept for people, but I wonder if we shortened it up if we said, what do we want? What do you want to be said about you at your going away party? Right? At your going away party from your work.
Right.
Maybe not even necessarily at your retirement dinner. Right? But like when you leave this job and go find your next job, what do you want to be said at you on your way out?
Or how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah. And just in those short moments, right? And I don't know, no one's ever going to be like, oh man, no one responded emails quicker than Clark. Right? Like that's,
That's not the thing.
That's not the thing. And so I think when we zoom out and see, by thinking about legacy, we think about our place in the world. We think about connection and the fact that everything is connected. We burn less bridges. We handle our confrontations with other individuals like we care about them, not like they are dismissible and will be dust in the wind. And so by thinking about legacy, we think about the impact that we are making and the ripples that we cause. It's interesting. I started talking a little bit more to just men in some of my speeches. I have a new talk that I do called Men Work in Progress. Excuse me. Called Men Work in Progress. And one thing I talk about is how we as men often are more focused on being cool than on being great. And being cool is short term, right? It's the quick laugh. It's the win the argument. It's the loud car. It's the whatever machismo thing here in that moment is, right? It's the quick victory. It's the quick fight, but how are you doing in the war, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And so I think that also kind of can stem into, I think that same theme can be applied here to what we're talking about, where it's like, yes, maybe it was just an argument. Maybe it was a disagreement. Maybe it was, whatever it looked like. But what are the ripples? So yeah. And it's tough because the other side of this is that, and I think a good counter argument to legacy is that we can't control it. We cannot control the way other people will think about us, the way we can try, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an issue. I know that's an issue of mine. Is as well is that, I can't control it. So why do I care so much? Why do I focus so much on it? And
it's interesting because so I interviewed a Stoic philosopher actually for this podcast, and there's an idea in Stoicism that is actually very relevant to that point, which is that essentially we should focus on what we can control and not focus on what we can't. So when it comes to getting promoted, say at a job, do your best at the job, do your best to put your paperwork together, whatever else you got to do. And then once you apply for the promotion, it's out of your hands. You've done the best you can at your job. You've done the best you can at writing your paperwork, whatever it might be. And you should not worry at that point because you've already done your best. And that's what you need to focus on. And then once it's out of your hands and somebody else gets to make decisions or whatever else, then it's a totally different matter. And there's a big split there. And I think this was what this guy was talking about, how that was a real strong way that the Stoics were able to focus in on themselves and not let other things kind of distract them from what was important.
Yeah. No, I love that. I agree. There are probably too many times for me where I am concerned more about how other people see me, like me, talk about me, view me, than I wish there were.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's power in that because I also know that I make sure every interaction means something, right? Like I don't just see conversation as flippant. I don't see meeting someone as like, well, you'll never be in my life again, so who gives a shit?
Right.
Right. Like
every interaction matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can learn something from everyone.
Totally.
And there's a push pull in there.
Yeah, no, but I totally agree with that. That's how I always love to ask the questions and like find out, okay, this person is an expert at something. What is it and what can I learn? That's why this podcast came to be. So talking about that though, I did really resonate with the point you made about how being emotional isn't always unprofessional, or it's not the same as being unprofessional. In that, I'm kind of like a weird, quirky guy, but a lot of people, especially in the early days of the podcast, were like, John, you're just like Mr. Boring librarian, just asking questions. What's going on here? And it is that kind of thing where you really want to appear professional, and a lot of times that's what you're taught. In order to be professional, you need to be very, I don't say stoic, but you need to be very like serious, maybe. And there's no room for humor. And I know from reading your book, a lot of what you do is insert the humor, bring the joy, bring the happiness, bring the silliness. I think that's so interesting. How are you able to uncouple that idea of professionalism must equal serious only, and how can we fix that more broadly in our lives?
Yeah, sure. I think this is such an interesting topic because as a white straight male, I'm able to do more things than other individuals and still be seen as professional. Right? So professionalism is a fascinating made-up construct.
Yeah. First off, let's point that out. Good call.
But like if you look at it like a sound wave, right? Like if you look at it like a sound wave, professionalism, you want that sound wave to never get higher than a certain point and lower than a certain point. Right. And professionalism is whatever those imaginary boundaries that are set where you don't ever want the top of your curve to be any higher than a certain point, or because otherwise, you're dramatic or you're depressing, or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's a Goldilocks zone.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, through systematic oppression, women have been given a more confined area to fall in. Right. And so have many other individuals as well, especially people of color. There's more that I can get away with as a white straight male in some of those places, just because of history.
Yeah.
And so I guess I would be remiss if we didn't also talk about that in here as well.
Sure. Great point.
And so where do I find it? It's when I think about it specifically for me, like I have not been given jobs that I've been finalists for. I literally had one person say, like, I don't know if you would take this seriously. You made too many jokes in your interview. Ooh. And it's not like it was up there being like, you mind if I do a quick tight 5? I got a great 15 on biscuits, right? Yeah. Like it's not like that.
You were just silly. You just had a funny thought or two and you threw it out. Yeah.
In a lot of our fields, if we're not laughing, we're crying. Yeah. Especially in some of the humanitarian fields. And so I see the value that I bring in laughter. And if they're worried about how funny I'm going to be, then I'm not going to be a good fit there. So in a way, thank you, even though I would have loved that job. In a way, thank you, because it lets me know what your company's culture is. So it's all balance,
Yeah.
I think it's all balance, and the way that we slowly release it. We don't show up our first day, pop it off, with our crazy jokes, or here's my depressing story about my grandmother. You got to feel it out, and then I think also, and this is why leadership is so cool, because it's so nuanced. And this is why emotional intelligence is so important. Even though we don't care about people's emotional intelligence until they're 30. And we don't celebrate it until then either. Yeah. But emotional intelligence is so important because every single person puts the top of the sound wave and the bottom of the sound wave lines at different places. And so it's about learning each individual. I remember one person that I supervised. He was like, why do you care about what's going on in my world outside of the work that you need me to do? He's like, we come in here. He's like, I want to come in here. I want you to tell me. He wanted me to treat him like a football coach, right? He's like, I want you to come in here. I want you to tell me what I'm not doing, and then I'm going to improve on those things, and you're going to tell me the next week if I've improved on them enough. And that's all I need from you. I'm not going to tell you where I had dinner last night. I'm not going to tell you any of those kind of stuff. And like, he was super closed off and wasn't interested in any of that. We would make our silly jokes here and there, but but after working with him for 3 years, when he left the office, he pulled me aside and he's like, I can't thank you enough. He's like, I know I was actively trying to push you away because I knew that you could make an impact on me. And he's like, and I knew that, he's like, I now see why you did what you did because of the relationship that I have for you and the trust that I have in you. He's like, I get it. He's like, so thanks for dealing with me when I was being closed off.
Wow.
And so that, some of that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's also backfired on me as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not everything's for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's one of the keys here. So, and then thinking about that, you had this chapter on titles, right? And trying to figure that out. And I think titles are one way of understanding, okay, not everything is for everybody. And so one way that we as humans take to quickly get, figure out, okay, what is this for what type of person is their title? How should I treat this person? And how should I behave towards them? What overtures should I make based on their title? And we use it as a shortcut. But even beyond titles, I think we a lot of times we'll find out, oh, are you a Democrat or a Republican? Where did you grow up? Like all these questions, I think, are sort of unconsciously because we're putting people in buckets. We're trying to stereotype them to a degree before we've had a chance to really hear them out. And I think that's dangerous. And I wonder if you could talk about that and think about how can we slow that instinct down? Because I really feel it is an instinct.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, man. And I agree that, and with multiple things that you said, it is an instinct. And because I think a lot of it comes back to our fight or flight.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think and then the next layer deeper is our thoughts about commitment and connection. Right. And what issues have we had in there in the past as well? And am I going to commit to this idea, or why would I believe that you actually care about me? Because society has shown me that historically people that look like you don't, or there's so many different layers, or my parents treated me this way, my parent treated me this way, and so therefore I now don't let people do blank blank or talk to me like whatever. There's so many different layers in there, and so in thinking about this, how do you slow that reflex down? That's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard, and I think it probably takes putting your foot in your mouth a number of times, right? And like seeing somebody in one place and then all of a sudden seeing them in a completely different setting and be like, oh shoot, look what they're doing. I had no idea they were a person that would do all that kind of cool stuff, or I had no idea that they were funny, or I had no idea that they also, cleaned oil off of baby seals in '89 at Valdez, right? Like, all those kind of stories.
Of course.
And so, yeah. I think the quicker we can catch ourselves at judging is important.
Right.
But we as human beings are pattern generators.
Yeah.
Right? Our brains are very efficient at generating patterns, so that when we see somebody or we learn something about them, it's almost like they fall into whatever slot. It's like, okay, cool.
Exactly.
Here's how I'm supposed to talk to you now then.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a long time to untrain those biases, those prejudices, or those... or also, like, I don't know, there's also like super trusting things that we can do. It's not always negative, but sometimes it's like too much on the other side too.
Right.
So yeah, man, I think you already hit the nail on the head, is that it's recognizing and giving yourself the patience to change. But it's listening to your impulses and then being like, why did I think what I just thought?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's a thought in my head.
Right, becoming aware. And I think that's, every now and again I try and meditate, and that's a big thing about meditation, is like actually noticing thoughts.
Yeah.
Because it's, thought will just pop in your head and you're like, wait, where did that come from? Why did that happen? And how can I deal with it? So I think that's a great point.
Yeah. And even as someone who has spent a lot of time around so many different kinds of people, right? Like, I know that I still have biases, but I'm getting better at catching them and shutting them down. I like that meditative thought of, like, in meditation, distractions are going to happen, but you're taught to almost be like Neo from the Matrix to them, where you're like slowly kind of like push them away.
Right.
And just be like, not right now.
Right.
Right. And so in our conversations with people, also being like, not right now, negative, assumptive, is assumptive a word? Thought.
Sounds good to me. We'll take it.
Not right now. Let me try to be in here.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me ask another question before I assume. Let me hear their story before I write it.
I like that one. What's the difference between pushing and pulling people to success? You use this, and I thought it really made a lot of sense in terms of what is going to be effective. What are the two, and which one should leaders be doing?
Right. I think leaders should push and not pull. I think that I think pulling sometimes looks like micromanagement, sometimes looks like it's forcing, and we're trying to pull people to a destination, as opposed to when we're pushing, we're recognizing that if I can teach you along the way how we're going to get there and not just do the thing for you, if I can teach you along the way, then you are going to see what part of this success you played a role in, right? I think employees are more happy when they can tell you what part of the success of the company that they played in.
Oh, yeah, they're part of that story.
Right. If they're part of, yeah, exactly. And, the leaders will have more words in the stories, but if that employee cannot tell you what word or two that they contributed to it, then they're going to start checking out and burning out.
Yeah.
Right. We're noticing that especially today in generational differences as well. Yeah, so that's a big thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. So talk about generational differences. You talked about email, right? And how some people are adept at email and some people are not. And email, it's the love and hate of my existence probably for a lot of people. It's the same, it's amazing, free, instant communication, but it also can cause so many problems. So you make some great points about what it's good for, what it's not, and then broadly about how we should handle conflict. So I kind of want to, think about that higher level. How should we be handling conflict? What's wrong with using email to deal with conflict? And when should we really just put the computer away and go out for some ice cream?
Yeah. I agree. I think email can be super effective. I think, sometimes we have really serious conversations over text message, and that's not always conducive because obviously the big drawback is we're not hearing emotions. Like, I don't care how many emojis you put in there. I don't care if parentheses you read, that was sarcasm. Right? Like, I don't care how much of you read. Like, the way that I read it is how I'm going to assume that you meant it. Now, I can try to work to give you the benefit of the doubt, but our history will let me know how good I will be at doing that for you based on our previous patterns of working together. And so, yeah, dude, I don't know. I think as far as when do you choose to have the face-to-face conversation versus the email, I think it depends on how much do we think this person is going to be emotionally affected by this conversation, right? And where can I point this out? Where are the places where I can point out that, hey, it's a very matter-of-fact thing of, hey, this needs to get done, versus, why have you been consistently late on projects for the last 6 months? Like, that's an in-person conversation. Where are you at with blank is another one.
Yeah.
We like to hide behind email, especially during feedback conversations. And it's just not effective because watching somebody else learn the way that they have impacted you is powerful. And that doesn't come across in email, right? We write that email with emotion. They don't see the emotion. We want them to take it seriously. They don't see that they want us to take it seriously, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Email's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be a problem.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And then the response that we get isn't always as good either.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, I wrote that with so much emotion. You're like, copy that, Steve.
Yeah. Thanks, bud. Yeah. All right. So this last question, I thought, I really liked your connection between purpose and fulfillment, and the idea that we can recognize our purpose and find a fulfilling job from that. I mean, I think that is the ultimate goal for most people. And how can we notice when that's not happening, or how can we see when that's a problem and try and solve it? How can we find a job that's great on paper but isn't going to work out? How do we get to the best place possible in terms of work, in terms of a job?
Yeah. It's fascinating because I think we always hear the phrase, love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
Right? But we also don't we don't talk enough about love where you do it. Right. And so like we could have a dream job and then have a crappy supervisor or have a unhealthy work environment, whatever. Right. And so that's a key piece as well. I think ultimately it's what do you go home and dream about?
Yeah.
You know, like what is it? Like what more do you want from this life? This is you picked up a pen and you started writing a story. Are you writing a story that you're excited to tell people? Are you writing a story that you're proud of? Are you writing a story that you think other people are going to want to read? And I think if we can say yes to all those things, then I think we're in alignment, right? We are more fulfilled. But if we can't say that, then that is where it's difficult. I think, an example is, currently on our team, North Coast, our improv team, which is also an LLC and a business that's doing really well, is that the leadership of the team, myself and my co-owner included, have realized that this is really amazing. And we love what we're doing and it's a lot of fun. But we have other things that we really love and want to do also.
Yeah.
And so how can we work it out to make it so that we can do both, right? Because if we just sat here and complained about it the whole time and got frustrated and got burnt out, that's not helping anybody, right? Or if we just, like in my case, it's like, I'm going to check out and I'm just going to focus on this other thing and I'll respond to those emails once a week, right? Like avoidance.
Yeah.
That's also not effective leadership. And so recognizing those patterns in each other, I think has been powerful.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most current example that I have with that, because the team is beautiful and what we do is amazing, and the work that we get to do, the impact that we get to have, and the laughter that we get to create is really freaking special. To get to do it through our own lens that we created. But the back end stuff and some of the business, if it's not working, then some things need to change, and let's figure that out. So I think that's, I don't know.
It's being aware. It's being conscious of when things start to, when things don't feel the same way they always did.
Yeah.
Maybe. Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, man.
All right. Well, that was the questions I had. Was there anything else? We talked about a lot. Was there anything else you hoped people would get out of the book that we haven't touched on?
I don't think so. I think, kind of one through line that we've probably noticed between all of our questions is it's like, well, it depends, or it's nuanced, and right? Like authentic leadership as a construct. I still have not come up with an exact answer for this, but some pushback that I've gotten on the book is that, is it idealistic or is it realistic? Can we all be our most vulnerable selves? And what does authenticity even mean? And like, does that mean I'm going to talk to you the same way I talk to my boys at the bar? Is that like, what does authenticity mean?
Yeah.
And so therefore that abstractness makes it feel more idealistic at times. And so that's an interesting pushback that, I don't know if you have people come on here and push back on their own books, but
it may be the first. But I like it.
But I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
And the ultimate thing is that I'm a firm believer in authentic leadership. I'm a practicer of authentic leadership. I think other people should put it in their leadership tool belt as a device to build connection, trust, and loyalty in their companies, in their communities, whatever, and even in their personal relationships. Where does this all fit? Is that it's all nuance. And I could have wrote the whole book. I could have wrote the book and handled every single nuance, but the book would have been 900 pages.
Right.
Instead,
and
it's
no
like,
one would have read it.
Right.
Would have been useful.
So I'm writing it from this angle to hope people can take it, take the parts that they can and apply them where they can, and not just be like, this is a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, this is too fluffy.
Right.
All these feelings and vulnerability, I'm out of here. That's not for me. It's for the birds. But that's an interesting pushback on the book that I love hearing, because in hearing it, I know I made them think.
Yeah.
And what bigger compliment can we get than I made you think?
I love it. All right. So where can people buy the book?
The book's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And maybe Books A Million. Let's say Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Cool.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
not in store. It's only online.
And I know you've got other stuff you're up to. So talk about your speaking gigs. How can people get a hold of you if they're interested in all that other great stuff you do?
Yeah, dude. I'm James T. Robo, R-O-B-O, JamesTRobo.com, James T. Robo on every single social media platform. Your boy looking real cute on Instagram. And what I do is I travel around the country and I talk to corporations and I talk to college students also about the role that authenticity, vulnerability, and storytelling need to play in leadership. And so, yeah, I'm down to come and speak to everybody, whatever it looks like, training workshops, helping you with new manager, all that kind of stuff.
Sounds good, man. All right, let's do a quick thunder round, and I'll learn a couple learn a couple fun stuff, couple fun things about you, and we'll call it a day.
I'm into it.
All right. What is your favorite food and or drink?
Favorite food, Mama Robilotta's spaghetti sauce.
Oh, she would be so proud.
I'll put her up against anybody's spaghetti sauce. Watch your mouth.
Done. Done. Where's your favorite place you've ever been?
Favorite place I've ever been. Right now, I'll put Iceland at the top of that list. Iceland was absolutely stunning. It was my first solo international trip I ever did, so it's also got a special thing
memory.
there.
Yeah.
I got to see the Northern Lights and got to drive around. And I love anywhere that makes me feel small, that makes me feel insignificant. It's a cool way to slow me down and remind me that, everything's fine.
Yeah.
The Earth's spinning, bro.
Right. The universe is a big place. It'll go on.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Last question. If you could wave a magic wand and change any one thing, what would it be and why?
What would it be and why? If I could change the magic wand and change anything, it would be to a little bit of what we talked about earlier. It would be to make people listen more. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think too many people are more interested in being right than what is right. They're more interested in being right than what is right. And I think that is hurting us.
Fair. Thank you so much for that. Well, this has been an amazing interview. The book, again, Leading Imperfectly, The Value of Being Authentic for Leaders, Professionals, and Human Beings. James, thank you so much for being on the show.
John, I appreciate it, man. This has been special. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Read, Learn, Live. If you liked it, tell a friend and subscribe on iTunes and Google Play. If you hated it, tell a friend and subscribe on iTunes and Google Play. And so it goes.